Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, Book the Third, The Track of a Storm. Chapter 1, In Secret. The traveller fared slowly on his way. Who fared toward Paris from England in the autumn of the year 1792? More than enough of bad roads, bad equipages, and bad horses he would have encountered to delay him. Though the fallen and unfortunate King of France had been upon his throne in all his glory, but the changed times were fraught with other obstacles than these. Every town, gate and village, taxing house had its band of citizen patriots, with their national muskets, in a most explosive state of readiness, who stopped all comers and goers, cross-questioned them, inspected their papers, looking for their names in lists of their own, turned them back, or sent them on, or stopped them and laid them in hold, that their capricious judgment or fancy deemed best for the dawning republic, one and indivisible, of liberty, equality, fraternity, or death. A very few French leagues of his journey were accomplished when Charles Darnay began to perceive that for him along these country roads there was no hope of return until he should have been declared a good citizen at Paris. Whatever might befall now, he must on his journey's end. Whatever might befall now, he must on to his journey's end. Not a mean village closed upon him, not a common barrier dropped across the road behind him, but he knew it to be another iron door in the series that was barred between him and England. The universal watchfulness so encompassed him that if he had been taken in a net or were being forwarded to his destination in a cage, he could not have felt his freedom more completely gone. This universal watchfulness not only stopped him on the highway 20 times in a stage, but rewarded his progress 20 times in a day by riding after him and taking him back, riding before him and stopping him by anticipation, riding with him and keeping him in charge. He had been days upon his journey in France alone, when he went to bed, tired out, in a little town on the high road, still a long way from Paris. Nothing but the production of the afflicted Gabelle's letter from his prison of the Abbey would have got him on so far. His difficulty at the guard-house in this small place had been such that he felt this journey to have come to a crisis, and he was therefore a little surprised as a man could be to find himself awakened at the small inn to which he had been remitted until morning in the middle of the night, awakened by a timid local functionary and 3 armed patriots in rough red caps with pipes in their mouths, who sat down on the bed. "Emigrant," said the functionary, "I am going to send you on to Paris under an escort." "Citizen, I desire nothing more than to get to Paris, though I could dispense with the escort." "Silence!" growled the red cap, striking at the coverlet with the butt end of his musket. "Peace, aristocrat!" "It is as the good patriot says," observed the timid functionary. "You are an aristocrat and must have an escort, and must pay for it." "I have no choice," said Charles Darnay. "Choice! Listen to him!" cried the same scowling red cap. "As if it was not a favor to be protected from the lamp iron." "It is always as the good patriot says," observed the functionary. "Rise and dress yourself, emigrant." Darnay complied, and was taken back to the guard-house, where other patriots in rough red caps were smoking, drinking, and sleeping by a watch-fire. Here he paid a heavy price for his escort, and hence he started with it, on the wet roads at 3 o'clock in the morning. The escort were 2 mounted patriots in red caps and tricolored cockades, armed with national muskets and sabres, who rode one on either side of him. The escorted governed his own horse, but a loose line was attached to his bridle, the end of which one of the patriots kept girded round his wrist. In this state they set forth, with the sharp rain driving in their faces, clattering at a heavy dragoon trot, over the uneven town pavement, and out upon the mire-deep roads. In this state they travelled without change, except of horses and pace, all the mire-deep leagues that lay between them and the capital. They travelled in the night, halting an hour or two after daybreak, and lying by until the twilight fell. The escort were so wretchedly clothed that they twisted straw round their bare legs, and thatched their ragged shoulders to keep the wet off. Apart from the personal discomfort of being so attended, and apart from such considerations of present danger as arose from one of the patriots being chronically drunk, and carrying his musket very recklessly, Charles Darnay did not allow the restraint that was laid upon him to awake any sense or any serious fears in his breast, for, he reasoned with himself, that it could have no reference to the merits of an individual case that was not yet stated, and the representations confirmed by the prisoner in the abbey that were not yet made. But when they came to the town of Beauvais, which they did at eventide, when the streets were filled with people, he could not conceal from himself that the aspect of affairs was very alarming. An ominous crowd gathered to see him dismount at the posting yard, and many voices called out loudly, "Down with the emigrant!" He stopped in the act of swinging himself out of his saddle, and resuming it as his safest place, said, "Emigrant, my friends, do you not see me here in France of my own will?" "You are a cursed emigrant!" cried a farmer, making at him in a furious manner through the press, hammer in hand. "And you are a cursed aristocrat!" The postmaster interposed himself between this man and the rider's bridle, at which he was evidently making, and soothingly said, let him be, he will be judged at Paris." "Judged," repeated the farmer, swinging his hammer. "Aye, and condemned as a traitor!" At this the crowd roared approval. Checking the postmaster, who was returning his horse's head to the yard, the drunken patriot sat composedly in his saddle, looking on with the line round his wrist. Darnay said, as soon as he could make his voice heard, "Friends, you deceive yourselves, or you are deceived. I am not a traitor." "He lies!" cried the smith. "He is a traitor since the decree. His life is forfeit to the people. His cursed life is not his own." At the instant when Darnay saw a rush in the eyes of the crowd, which another instant would have brought upon him, the postmaster turned his horse into the yard. The escort rode in close upon his horse's flanks, and the postmaster shut and barred the crazy double gates. The farrier struck a blow upon them with his hammer, and the crowd groaned, but no more was done. "What is this decree that the smith spoke of?" Darnay asked the postmaster when he had thanked him, and stood beside him in the yard. "Truly, a decree for selling the property of emigrants." "When passed?" "On the 14th. "The day I left England." "Everybody says it is but one of several, and that there will be others, if there are not already, banishing all emigrants, and condemning all to death who return. That is what he meant when he said your life was not your own." "But there are no such decrees yet." "What do I know?" said the postmaster, shrugging his shoulders. "There may be." "Oh, there will be. It is all the same. What would you have?" They rested on some straw in a loft until the middle of the night, and then rode forward again, when all the town was asleep. Among the many wild changes observable on familiar things, which made this wild ride unreal, not the least was the seeming rarity of sleep. After long and lonely spurring over dreary roads, they would come to a cluster of poor cottages, not steeped in darkness, but all glittering with lights, and would find the people, in a ghostly manner in the dead of night, circling hand in hand round a shriveled tree of liberty, or all drawn up together singing a liberty song. Happily, however, there was sleep in Beauvais that night to help them out of it, and they passed on once more into solitude and loneliness, jingling through the untimely cold and wet, among the impoverished fields that had yielded no fruits of the earth that year. diversified by the blackened remains of burnt houses and by the sudden emergence from ambuscade and sharp reining up across their way of patriot patrols on the watch on all the roads. Daylight at last found them before the wall of Paris. The barrier was closed and strongly guarded when they rode up to it. "Where are the papers of this prisoner?" demanded the resolute-looking man in authority, who was summoned out by the guard. Naturally struck by the disagreeable word, Charles Darnay requested the speaker to take notice that he was a free traveller and French citizen in charge of an escort which the disturbed state of the country had imposed upon him, and which he had paid for. "Where," repeated the same personage, without taking any heed of him whatever, "are the papers of this prisoner?" The drunken patriot had them in his cap, and produced them. Casting his eyes over Gabelle's letter, the same personage in authority showed some disorder and surprise, and looked at Darnay with close attention. He left escort and escorted, without saying a word, however, and went into the guard-room. Meanwhile, they sat upon their horses outside the gate, looking about him. While in this state of suspense, Charles Darnay observed that the gate was held by a mixed guard of soldiers and patriots, the latter far outnumbering the former, and that while ingress into the city for peasants' carts bringing in supplies and for similar traffic and traffickers was easy enough, egress even from the homeliest people was very difficult. A numerous medley of men and women, not to mention beasts and vehicles of various sorts, was waiting to issue forth. But the previous identification was so strict through the barrier that they filtered through the barrier very slowly. Some of these people knew their turn for examination to be so far off that they lay down on the ground to sleep or smoke, while others talked together or loitered about. The red cap and tricolour cockade were universal both among men and women. When he had sat in his saddle some half-hour, taking note of these things, Darnay found himself confronted by the same man in authority who directed the guard to open the barrier. Then he delivered to the escort, drunk and sober, a receipt for the escorted and requested him to dismount. He did so, and the two patriots, leading his tired horse, turned and rode away without entering the city. He accompanied his conductor into a guard-room smelling of common wine